Greetings everyone, Brad here with Mild Manner DDC. Today we're going to do a classic Mild Manner review of another knife sent to me by my buddy Topher. If you recall, he sent me the Texel, and along with that he also sent this. This is the GiantMouse Ace Nimbus. That's right, the Nimbus. Very interesting little knife, and just GiantMouse in general, kind of an interesting company. So I think this would be a fun review. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this knife right out of the gate. So let's start with GiantMouse. So GiantMouse is a company founded by two very famous knife designers, Jens Anso, like the Anso Orso, is a knife that he's very well known for, as well as Jesper Voxnäs. And Voxnäs, some obviously also very well-known knives out there, including the CRKT Pilar, however it's pronounced, but definitely a knife that pretty much everybody knows if you're in the knife hobby, and likely you're going to know if you're starting to get into the knife hobby. It's probably going to be one of the first knives that somebody recommends to you or that you see look about picking up. So anyways, that's just sort of what we're talking about here. Now, these knives are made, both those designers are Danish. But their knives are made out of Magnago, Italy, which is kind of the cutlery center of Italy. It's other companies like Fox Knives and Viper Knives, Mazzarine, etc. All those Italian brands coming out of there. So there you go. And the Ace line, and as I mentioned, this is the Ace Nimbus. So this Ace line is what they describe on their website as the no muss, no fuss utilitarian version. And I think what they're trying to say is this is the slightly cheaper, a little more available, maybe not quite as fancied up, and certainly not as limited as their traditional GiantMouse line, which are knives that, they do like a limited run of like 300 or 500 or something like that, and then they're gone and done and never to be built again. These, I think, are designed to be a little more. Now, there isn't a parallel here, I don't think, from like Civivi knives to WE knives, sort of, Civivi being that budget branch of the WE knife company. That's not really what this is, because this knife is not a budget knife, and it's got still pretty high-end materials going on here. So, like I said, I don't think there's a parallel there necessarily, but for whatever purpose, this is what they're seeing as their sort of second tier in terms of price and sort of exclusivity in the knives that they're making. So anyways, probably said more on that than I needed to, but I think it's important, just for people who are interested or maybe just never heard of this brand before. So there you go. And in fact, I think this is the first GiantMouse I've featured on the channel, which is great. I've handled a few of their knives, but they're cool. They're interesting. They're kind of different creatures. So with that, let's go ahead and do a spec check first, and then we'll do a few quick size comparisons, and then we'll just jump into our classic mild-mannered review. So let's talk specs. We've got a blade length here of 3 inches, a blade thickness of 0.14 inches, a handle thickness, a handle length of 4.25 inches, a handle thickness of 0.55 inches, which gives us an overall tip to tail here of 7.25 inches and a weight of 4.04 ounces. So not the lightest knife out there, and in fact, not the thinnest light knife out there, at least from this kind of standpoint. It's a little bit thick. So there you go. Now, let's talk a couple size comparisons. So we've got here the Ace Nimbus. And by the way, the Nimbus name, I believe, comes from like a old Danish motorcycle or something like that. I think I read that as well. And it's basically, the motorcycle that wasn't meant to break any speed records or do anything, kind of funny like that, but really just be a workhorse. And I think that's what they're kind of claiming this to be, as sort of the workhorse. This is a workhorse knife, right? That's really, I think, what they're going for here. So anyways, how about a Benchmade bug out? There you go, on a size comparison. I also think it's interesting to highlight the size comparison this way. There you go, or thickness comparison rather. So there we go, how about that? And then how about the other knife that Topher sent along to me, the Bestech Texel. So there you go. And then how about a classic mild-mannered Swiss Army knife. So there you go. A few size comparisons. I think you get a sense. Not a big knife by any stretch of the imagination. The other thing I do want to mention real quick. So this one is in a green micarta. This was a limited edition run on this particular model. In fact, I think most of them are sold out right now. So I am sorry. Well, I'm sorry for that. I mean, I don't like to. I feel bad doing a review on a knife that you really can't go ahead and get, but you may be able to get them in the future. I don't know if you'll be able to get this exact model. Like I said, this one was limited, but there are other versions that they had out there with G10 scales. I don't know if they'll be doing more of those or not. So, my sense is they probably will be, but it seems like it's part of the Ace lineup. So, and the Ace lineup includes other knives that you've probably heard of, like the Biblio, the Iona, the Clyde was, I think, their most recent, and it was very well received. I'm still kind of interested in that knife. I may check that out one of these days when I get around to it. So, anyways, let's go ahead and get into the classic mild manner review. When we do a classic review here on the channel, we talk blade, and then we talk action, we talk handles, scales and hardware, and then we talk ergos and carry. So let's jump right into blade. Very interesting blade on this knife. Very attractive. In fact, they describe it as a Puko style blade. Okay. Whatever. I think it looks just, it's pretty much a drop point as far as I can see, but it is an M390 steel. Very nice. It's a very sterile blade. You'll see there is no M390 marking anywhere on this blade, and we'll talk about that because it is somewhere on the knife.
I despise guessing game.
But yeah, apart from the GiantMouse logo and then that Ace designation for the line there. Yeah, very sterile, very good looking. This is a nice satin blade, and I don't know if the standard ones were more of a stone wash. I think that's what it may have looked like when I was checking this out online. Just doing a little bit of my research before I like to get my facts as straight as I can for you all. So I think this being a satin finish may also be part of that exclusive run they did with this particular variant. So I think the others may be stonewashed. So there you go. It's a very nice blade, very tall, flat ground blade. They did a nice grind, very symmetrical on both sides. Very nice choil for sharpening. As you can see, it misses the plunge line here. Always nice to see. Very well chamfered here in the opening hole, opening aperture. Is that something to call it? Now, this knife also has something on it, so it's got a little jimping here, but it also has something on it that I really do like, and I am a big sucker for, and that is a crowned spine. And that means that the spine of the knife up here is rounded or crowned, if you will. And just to show you kind of the difference, if you can see, you've got sort of this flat standard look. On most knives, this you can see around the jimping really accentuates that, where you've just got that rounded look. So anyways, I really like that. I had an Anso Orso at one point and very much liked that on that knife as well. So ever since then, I've been a little bit of a sucker for that. So there you go. The other thing I will note about this knife, it does have a pretty thick blade stock. Now it comes down, like I said, it's a surprisingly good slicer. I will say that. For as thick as it is, I was a little surprised. It's a very good slicer, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's part of it's a tool knife sort of thing. Let's make it sturdy and, whatever. But there you go. It's a very nice blade. Nothing to complain about with the blade. And as I mentioned, very well chamfered, very well done with the grind, etc. And I think just an attractive looking blade. So let's talk action. So, the action is interesting on this knife. It's running on ball bearings. It's a very good action from the standpoint of smoothness. And it is designed to sort of, you flick it out with your thumb. As you can see, the sort of space on this side versus the space on this side is a little different. So flicking it's a little bit more tricky. You kind of got to jam your finger in there. Oops, and he fails it. That was for demonstration purposes only. I did that on purpose. No. And I did that one on purpose too. There you go. Now I'm showing you how it can be done, because it can be done. And in fact, while I was carrying this, I was actually finding myself opening it that way more often than not. So it clearly can be done, and despite my own fumbling around here on camera. But anyways, there you go. But like I said, so it's not drop shutty at all, really. That's just not what it's designed to do, but it is very, very smooth. It does have sort of that, it's, well, yeah, I mean, it's a nice smooth opening and close. Yeah, it's decent. Nothing to complain about too much there. So that's what we're sitting on with the action. As I mentioned, ball bearings, very centered. Yeah, okay, pretty centered. Nothing wrong there. And it is a liner lock. So as you can see there, liner lock with about a 20% lockup. So very good. And no blade play, maybe just a touch of blade play, but that could be because I, maybe mess with the pivot. No, Topher, I didn't take your knife apart, I promise. But a little bit of blade play there. So, yeah, I bet if I tightened that up, it would go right away, but just something to be aware of. Yeah, so anyways, so that's where we are with action. Now let's talk scales and hardware. So as I mentioned, this is a green micarta as part of that run, which is done very nice. If you like micarta, you're going to like this. Micarta is what micarta is. Now, those are the sort of insights I offer here, right? Micarta is what micarta is. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty standard. Now, it does have stainless steel liners, and I think the liners are worth showcasing a little bit here. Because they did some nice skeletonizing. You can see, I think you can see that in there. Yeah, there you go. Some nice skeletonizing. Very, very nice. Good work. And then the other thing they did with the liners, and let's see here. There you go. So you can see they've got some engraving inside. So they've got the logo. They've got, this side says Vox. This side says Anso. It says Maniago, Italy. And then it says M390. There you go. So that's actually the blade marking right there. Now, I think that's pretty darn cool. I think that's a really nice touch. It's unique. There are some other makers out there that do that as well, but I don't know. I just think it's a cool touch, especially for a production-y kind of knife. So there you go. That's kind of what we got there with scales and hardware. I will notice there is a wire clip here, and we'll talk about that a little more in carry. It does have sort of a stonewash finish, which is a little interesting. It's not satiny like the pivot or the blade, but it's got kind of a stonewash finish there. So anyways, so that's what we got going on in scales and hardware. Now let's talk about ergos and carry. So I actually think this is quite an ergonomic knife. Feels very good to me in hand. I've heard some people complaining about this clip being a hot spot, particularly because of that ski jump. And if we want to compare it here to, let me grab, bear with me. Didn't fall off the chair. That's good. Slightly different, as you can see, than the Spyderco wire clip. But I like that it sort of rounds this back part off, which is kind of cool. Although there's not quite as much space in there. But I don't like the ski jump. I like the way this finishes off on the Spyderco one better than this. So anyways, yeah. So that's kind of what you got going on with the clip. And like I mentioned, I think the ergos are pretty darn nice. The clip does not bother me from a hotspot standpoint. I could see that it might bother some. Now, the other thing that this thing does from an ergo standpoint is kind of hard to explain. It sort of has this scooch factor. And you can so you can kind of hold it, right? And then you can really sort of scooch your hand up. Scooching. There you go. This comes with trademark GiantMouse scooching. And you can kind of scooch and when you scooch up, your thumb lands perfectly on that little bit of jimping. And that has to be done by design, I think. Those two designers really know ergos. And so I just feel like, obviously that was very intentional. So it's cool. I like that a lot. It's kind of an interesting, I don't know. It's just a little different, but it's definitely neat from the ergo standpoint. So from a carry standpoint, so a couple things. So it's thick, as I mentioned. It's a little bit on the heavy side. And it's got one thing that I really am not a fan of. And that's here. The blade edge is just a wee bit. And it's actually this. So this is what's unfortunate about this. It's actually not that close to the top of the scales there, but I can feel it because of the space that's here. I can touch it with my pinky.
That's a damn shame.
And I've had knives like that before where I've went into my pocket, run my hand around down the side. The Kaiser Theta comes to mind, and sliced my pinky with that. So that's a little bit of a bummer to me. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. So, anyways, a little bit of that there. No real issue with the tip here. I can't get my finger in there at all to be damaged. But and from a carry standpoint, like I said, it's a little heavy, a little thick. And it slides into the pocket fine, but yeah, I don't know why it's a deep carry clip. Why why they couldn't have bumped that up a little more? So it's the carry and that this exposed spot here a little bit that are my biggest gripes on this knife. And this one's a little bit unfortunate. I can forgive this, especially when it is. I'm sorry, I didn't mention. I didn't mention two things. One, there's lanyard hold, and two, this is an ambidextrous carry, so you can swap the clip around. So that's cool. But yeah. So there you go. Now this knife runs you about $175. So as I mentioned, not cheap, but you're getting good materials. Generally pretty good fit and finish. Not perfect. A couple little flaws in there, but overall, I have to say, there's a lot. For some reason, though, I like this knife. It's just a knife I really like. And I don't know if it's just a combination of the look, of the steel, of the quality of the materials. The action's kind of interesting and unique. That crown spine, the engraving inside the scales. I don't know. There's just something about it that I do like, but it does have some flaws as well. So there you go. That's kind of my take on this knife. I mean, on some level, I actually really like it. On another level, I think it's got some things I wish they would fix, and maybe they'll do that in future iterations. That would be cool. So I think if they did, I might actually pick one of these up. So anyways, that's where we go with this review. I hope it's been useful. I hope you found it interesting. The GiantMouse Ace Nimbus. Thank you again very much, Topher, for loaning these to me. I will get them back to you ASAP. And, with that, stay safe out there. Be mild-mannered to one another. And all the best.